The title is a bit misleading. And actually, the whole setup here was supposed to be a panel, and us bringing in a couple of clients that would actually share first-hand knowledge about their recent expansions. You mentioned the bugs and flu, so I'm alone. I'll add some information coming from us, and of course I'm happy to exchange about your own experiences and let you know some of the second-hand information that I have from these clients. The title misleading in a way that, of course, we want you to worry about payments. Given that we're a payment company, that's the only thing we worry about all the time. But I actually want to just briefly touch on the points that are actually considered issues or problems or like just interesting things about payments if you scale across countries. But I don't want to treat them as my main subject, being a payment provider, but actually touch on a couple of other things that we find, given our product, even more important because it's something we can support, but it's not our core offer to our clients. So just a brief overview of where does this information come from, where do we source our experiences. So we've actually grown to currently serve about 2,500 platforms across Europe. This is of course very, very small one-person startups up to corporate platforms that are operating on our system. And we're actually, currency-wise and country-wise, we're at 160 countries that we received or sent payments to. So it's become a global company coming from France, expanding step by step through Europe, and now actually serving customers all around the world. And actually, something that I want to touch more on, since my clients are missing, the offices that we have on ourselves. So we're, in a way, we could actually put in a lot of information about how this feels expanding across Europe from Mangopay's view itself, given that we're now in a 5th office. The 6th one is just now opened, and actually come from a dozen of different cultures ourselves. So we had the pain internally, and we can also then see how that reflects in the expansion of our clients. Given this is only my viewpoint, this is just something we can extract from the clients we already talked to and we experience their growth. So as a general statement, whatever is happening, avoid the noise is what we usually say. You got to test these things. There's no blueprint for going from country to country and you just know, okay, if I do France, I'll do this and everything's fine. If I go to Denmark, I do this and I'm happy. You will test these things, you will fail a lot, and especially when it's about a match between the target culture and your product of the platform, this will be something very individual, so we can only give you a couple of hints on what to look for and what pitfalls not to fall into. This is something I'll skip because that's something that you have to do as your own homework. You're choosing the markets, right? So we're not usually involved in the phase of sourcing markets, finding a market fit for the product, finding the right culture that you should enter, maybe a good competitive framework for you to start off in. We'll start into the situation where that was decided, whatever that means for you. You might have some ideas of where you want to go and what market would fit your product, but this would not be our concern in this scope. So we'll start here. Given, again, that we're a payment company, we usually come in when it comes to delivery or logistics. So we're actually providing a product that is not so much as a gateway for payments, but it's an infrastructural product for you to operate like you're a bank or similar to a bank without having to deal with the overhead of the license keeping and the regulation, auditing, etc. So we usually only come in, or companies like us only come in when it's about the execution, about the logistics and the delivery of the product. But what we find is actually more important to almost anyone that we work with is the bottom pillar of this is the trust. Now you decided on a market, you found out how the cultural behavior habits look like, you found out whether the product is something that fits that market. And the very first thing that you want to do is to come in with whoever processing your payments and create a name, a brand that someone trusts, even though you're foreign at first. So generally, every one of us, any customer that you've known of, prefers things that they know, prefers things that they understand. Native language, long time in the market, they will always be the #1 preference, and now you're coming in as a fresh new starter, and you gotta create something that makes them trust you enough to send their money your way. So let's focus on that. There's a couple of subcategories that we actually identified that are relevant for the trust point. Not all of them we have our experience in, so the customer care, the curated content, etc. It's not something that we're involved, so I don't want to touch on that too much, but actually talk about the things that we understand, and that is the rating and verification systems. It's the interface. It comes down to design sometimes, but it's much more than actually designing the interface. It's an experience that you're designing, and the guidelines. This is actually something I want to jump in a bit more because it's overlooked a lot, because it's very dry and it's not very colorful usually, but this is one of the most efficient things that we have experienced when people jump cross-border to cross-border country, is to create guidelines that make customers in those markets understand, how should I use this product? How am I supposed to behave when I'm part of this community, of this marketplace? How are my counterparts supposed to behave? And what are my rights and risks when I join? And what can I do if something doesn't go the way that it's supposed to go? Just as an intro, I actually added this morning when I knew that there wouldn't be much input from someone else. All of these points, they're evolving. Right? Again, that's why I said in the beginning, there's no blueprint that I can give anyone about what to do and then it works out. Because you can see, and this is a really good source of information that you would want to look into, it's called Edelman's Trust Report, where this agency actually does surveys about how much do people trust governments, companies, even family members, I think are part of this study, and kind of create a cultural image of how deeply rooted is trust or distrust in certain countries' cultures. And you can see in this example that it's actually changing quite a lot. So the title of this was this distrust is growing, meaning that whatever has worked last year in a certain country might actually evolve to be a problem for you expanding or staying in that country 2-3 years down the road, because these things are not static. It's a cultural, behavioral thing that might be affected heavily due to politics, to economics in that country, that you can't control and are out of your scope, but you will have to react in order to stay relevant in those markets. There's another one that actually also makes a distinction between just audit groups. So they have an informed public and a mass population difference. So even that is something that you would have to consider, knowing you have a product for a very specific target group that would rather be on the left side of this, or you have a broad fashion, for example, market that you want to just spread out or all kind of categories of population. That even in those two, there would be a difference on how you can approach that market and what you have to do to earn someone's trust. So I urge everyone to have a look at this. It's really interesting. Whenever you actually want to pick a market to go to, you've got to know how are these people behaving and how much effort will it take you to make them understand that you're trustworthy and the people that you represent on your marketplace are trustworthy. So the number one that I mentioned is the verification and the rating. So this is very technical because it's also part of the product that providers offer. You have all kinds of partners you can actually use to create rating systems, whether you build your own or use Trustpilot or whatever's out there, just to give a transparent view on what's happening on usually a provider per provider level. So not just the whole marketplace is awesome, but actually each provider getting ratings, getting badges. It's very important. Germany, actually, one of the markets that loves badges. I think in general, it's a good idea to have visuals for whatever security you're suggesting. And then there's one thing that's more specific to what we offer, and it's more important for me to mention, is verification. Because usually when we go out and we pitch a product that we sell, then we have a hard time like explaining why verification is a good idea. You know, it makes the onboarding slower. You offer, whether that's a seller of a physical product or some service offering that you promote on your marketplace, has to go through a longer series of verification steps. You might lose them on the way. Of course, conversion-wise, always a big hassle. When it comes down to you enforcing this and you promoting and giving positive incentives to do this, it's one of the biggest leverages that marketplaces have when they build a trusted checkout system, a trusted escrow system with us, is that they go away from treating verification as a hassle in the conversion of an onboarding of a seller, and make it a positive point about that marketplace. Saying we vet these people, we find out exactly who these companies are that stand behind them, and we verify, we give you a trusted signal of, look, we checked who this is. We've seen the business in the background. You take on a little bit of responsibility that might be daunting at first, given that someone could claim you did that wrong and they trusted you and then something bad happened. But overall, this is one of the main key factors that the successful companies we've seen scale across 30 plus countries, is that they stopped worrying about this step and made it a good point of their onboarding. The next one is the interface is actually a bit far off what I'm usually involved in, but of course you can create all kinds of visuals, text, backgrounds, just even explanations that make it easy to go through step by step through this verification process and don't make it such a big hassle. Well, let's skip that one and come back to my favorite, the boring guidelines. So I actually had a talk just half an hour ago with someone that also asked me if they can move into a position as a marketplace to kind of get in the middle of the transactions, be opinionated, right, and have the tools to be opinionated. Of course, again, it requires you to take a leap of faith in knowing that you're doing a good job interacting with those two parties. In the worst case, even if it's getting really uncomfortable, to be in a position to make a good call on what's right and what's wrong. But the base of all that, of the possibility to say, I'm coming into a market, if you purchase, if you order something on my marketplace, I will be the one taking care of whatever happens, gets solved. Whether that's in your favor as a buyer or in the favor of the seller on that marketplace, it will be based on transparent guidelines. It will not be some black box that you just have to trust that everything works out. You can read about exactly each corner case, again, an evolving situation that you can't know upfront, so you'll add to these documents again and again and again whenever something happens that you didn't know of. But make sure that you cover the tiniest little consequences that could come into place when some of the parties behave in a way that they weren't supposed to. This is specifically true, of course, again, from our product view, if you handle money at the same time. So if it's not just negotiating whether the two parties are happy with each other, but actually if you hold the funds of someone in that meantime, actually I didn't see you, that was the discussion that I mentioned. That is particularly important then. Right? So you come in, someone doesn't know your name, they wanna be able to trust that the money that you're holding for them for a transaction that might be still in the making, for a product that's still in delivery, that there is no way that something can happen that they don't know of upfront. And that means pages long of really specific guidelines about every single step of your workflow. Ideally in native tongue, of course. If you go abroad, again, as part of the first study that I didn't mention, study the penetration of English language in those countries. These things are the ones that you want to have meticulously translated into each of your target countries' languages. All right. This comes into place again, so I actually underlined that just with a workflow. It's the same point. You take on responsibility of judging, of taking the last call, of writing guidelines that are legally binding for both parties, and you will be in charge of implementing and enforcing these rules. So don't be afraid taking that stance, building that name that you want to build, a fair, transparent name for yourself, and step into the middle, following those guidelines, and make a call on it. Because the people on these marketplaces that you're not used to, in countries that you might just be starting off in, they will look for someone with a strong opinion, ideally in their favor, of course, but rather have someone with a strong opinion judge against their favor than someone where they didn't know what happened. So we have a lot of examples for that, is that companies actually start branding their payment processes, say, okay, this is not a provider, like PayPal, for example, that I just added and it's a third party handling this, but this is me. I will be the one judging on this. I give it a brand name, one of our clients' examples is Trusted Checkout. It's on Chrono24, where they actually said you can opt in for a variant of our checkout that's trusted. That's a bit more expensive as for securities, but whenever something happens, we will be there and we will take a call for or against you. Data protection. That was actually something that I wanted a client to touch on. Specifically when going to countries like the Netherlands currently, there are very strong differences in the aspect of data protection between Germany and the Netherlands, for example. Even if you think that in Germany it would be quite strict, the Dutch government is enforcing quite a strong opinionated view on what data you should share and whatnot. We had a couple of examples last year that we had to learn how to treat these, that our clients needed to adjust to how to treat these cases. Just saying, whenever you are handling this information, obviously make sure that this is a cultural, behavioral thing as well. There's no one-size-fits-all for even stuff like that. You can use all kinds of standards, but when it comes down to someone's really personal identity data, you gotta adjust and make that a local approach. Don't try and cover it all with one strategy. Hidden challenges, yeah, they're not usually that hidden. If any one of you is actually currently processing cross-border, you'll experience them every day. You know that it's something to really, to drive up your bottom line cost, and something that you would try to, of course, avoid. I said in the beginning, I don't want to talk about the actual payment process so much. This is the stuff that a provider should take care of. I'm not, no advertising here, but this is not something that you would want to take care of. Right? You want to take care of building the bottom foundation of what you need for someone to even get to this point, to even complain about a delayed payment. They already made that decision to process a payment with you. Right? So let this go into the hands of whoever you decide to partner up with, and you got to focus really on the very first steps of making someone getting to that point of risking a delayed payment. So maybe since I mentioned that we actually got into that position myself, and I don't want to use too short, this is our contact data, adding to those experiences. I mentioned in the beginning that we're currently in 5 countries, and you would assume that it's a European license that we work on, and actually the assumption from Paris was, you can just transport and passport this all across Europe without any problems. In our case, we're not a marketplace where you have the exact same issues that I just mentioned. So the very first thing was that we came to, the first country was the UK, we came to Germany, and we said, look, this is us, this is our colorful brand name, this is Mangopay, come on, buy into it. Right? We're handling your money, we're handling your client's money, it's very safe, we got a license, let's do it. The French office actually sells that way, and quite efficiently. We had to learn that the tiniest little differences in just how you phrase, what kind of laws you comply to, how you even name the escrow account that the money is on, had to be adjusted for each of those markets to even let someone just get into a discussion with you. Specifically here, again, I think this is a very German mentality, that the references to given law in Germany were so strongly opinionated against laws in Luxembourg, in France, that really had to rethink everything we say, the moment from the first introduction to the point of price negotiation, where we thought we can just take all the slides from Paris, go out and start selling. And we needed to have, it took at least half a year sitting down with law agencies, with law firms here in Berlin, and really figuring out exactly what references can we do, what should we do, how can we adapt this, and how can we target a customer that has a completely different understanding of what we're selling and what they want to buy into. The same in UK, so the UK is actually only price and speed focused. So this is also something interesting for us, because then we had gone through all this, okay, we rework all the contracts, we rework all the pitches, we change the wording and everything, and then we come to the UK and they say, hey, we don't care. We don't really care, we only want it to be really cheap and really fast. Again, 2-3 months down the road, adjusted all the pitches, adjusted all the processes internally actually to match this understanding of what they want. And then that's only 3 markets. There were markets that we thought are so equal that we can just go out and take a blueprint and do the same thing again and again. it doesn't work. Right? So start with the core understanding of what you need to do for someone to say, okay, let's hear what you want to offer. Thank you.
And now there's questions between us and lunch. We have 5 more minutes. Are you ready to take 2 questions?
Sure, of course.
If there are some.
If there are some.
Are there any questions? None of you just about to implement payment. None of you trying to solve one thing that's simply not working.
Netherlands reaction somewhere.
Is there? No?
Yeah.
No question? Okay, cool.
So thank you first for your input. Just a very short question. You were talking a lot about enforcing guidelines, and how do you reduce for you the overhead, like getting into the trenches and you have some kind of discussions, there is something going wrong in a transaction between 2 parties. How much do you get invested in that? Because it creates a lot of overhead. How do you solve that problem?
Yeah, so in Mangopay's case, we have to get involved, given that we grant the license for the marketplace to operate on. So whenever it comes down to legal actions as critical as that, then we have to get involved, and that will be all our overhead. We take over from you as the client. There's nothing we try to prevent, because again, looking at our own trust building, if that would be something that doesn't happen, then we couldn't sell whatever we're selling. So this is our first step, is making people know that if something goes wrong, no one can take a call anymore. No one can judge this. It comes down to a legal, a court order, whatever it is. Then we'll be there. Right? So you can call us. You can make sure that everything is provided in terms of information about the transactions, about the people involved. We will be the very last stance in this. And there's not really nothing we try to avoid. It's really, whenever that happens, we try to push forward and be there as much as we can. It's an expensive overhead, but in terms of reselling that product, it's the core thing that we have to do. On the client side, because that's probably more what you're going for, you would, of course, most of the providers that you can work with, they offer a lot of tools for you to automate as much as you can of this. And a lot of the interactions between parties can be, to a certain point, categorized so thinly that you can automate a lot of the dispute process until someone really takes legal action. But it was actually part of the trust block that I didn't touch on because we're not heavily involved. It's a native speaking customer care. You shouldn't try and shy away from that. Whatever you're setting up as a business model, it has to include covering costs for this, our opinion, because if you try and shy away, you will always, it could work in some niche markets maybe where there's just basic trust between the parties already, but if you're really on a general understanding marketplace where people don't know each other much before, then this is part of what you have to take on.
Thanks for a very fruitful answer. So now we actually don't have time for another question. I just have 2 remarks. First of all, thank you. Big round of applause.
Thank you.